take an interest in you. You may have a chance if you follow these rules. Don't come on too strong, a girl likes a mystery. Give it some air, forget the soliloquy. If I think I might have a future with you, you'll never know, boy, unless you play it cool.
Welcome back. Welcome back after 3 years. 3 years, Ljubljana, Slovenia. Some, maybe most of you, were there. Very nice memories. And it is almost 3 years ago. So I think all of us should be extremely happy to meet again today in Antwerp. Some of you have been here before at an ERC conference in the year 2000. Maybe can I have a raise of hands? Who was here? Just have an impression? Yeah, that's like 15%. It was in the same building. It was older. It's now renovated. For me, it's fantastic being here again in this magnificent building, actually in my own city, the city where I was born, but that is probably pure coincidence. But we have been here before, probably most, if not all of you, but virtually last year. And at that time, virtually in Antwerp, we had, I think, 3,000 participants. We didn't think of going back to Antwerp. We just did something virtually, and we thought of doing it in Antwerp. Now, who was here virtually last year? Can I have a show of hands? That is 85%. Yeah. Virtual, has its limitations. Federico, our co-chair, is here. Where are you, Federico? There he is. He had a really hard time being flat on the screen. He did his best, but he's dying for a hug. So you know where he is. Be careful. But Federico, welcome back. And I'm really happy that you're here in 3D. This is Antwerp. Antwerp at the River Scaldis, historical city. Also historical building here today. And just to give you some idea of where you are, if you're new, this is like a drone's view from above the venue. This is the central station where most of you have arrived. This is the Congress Center we are in. And this is the zoo. So as you can see, if you step out of the conference center, you are actually in the zoo. And tonight, we will have a social event. There will be more than 400 of you participating, so that's fantastic. It will be in the Marble Hall. It will be partially inside in the Marble Hall and partially at the terrace. Outside, the weather will be fantastic. It will not be raining. And in addition, at 9 o'clock, and some of the screens will say 9:30, but at 9 o'clock, the doors of the zoo will open and the main door will close. So it's only for us, the zoo, and we will have a walk through the zoo guided by people from the zoo. And that will be, I'm sure, very, very nice. So this is something I look forward to even more than to the lectures. Except my own, of course. This conference is about implementation. Now, that's a difficult word, but implementation is from the science and education to saving lives. And also in the ERC, we realize that implementation is probably the most important part, because you can have all the science and all the education, but if the lives are not saved, if it's not put in practice very concretely, then lives will not be saved. And I think we're not doing that enough in a systematic way. Probably we need to set more ambitious goals and work towards these goals by using the tools we know. We know the best way of doing CPR. We know that kids save lives. We know that education is important. But how that translates most efficiently and effectively in outcome, that is a challenge for the future. So that is what our conference is about, and surely that is what we probably should concentrate most in the next 5, even 10 years. It is now my great, great honor and pleasure to introduce to you Cathy Burks, the Governor of Antwerp. Please.
Ik heb geen slides, hè?
Ah ja, oké.
Just some. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, most welcome to Antwerp. Rushed by a curious urge to provide as much information as possible in as short time as possible. This is how I felt the first time when I called emergency number 112, when I witnessed a serious incident with visible serious injuries. The first time it happened in the most unlikely context, resulting in the operator not wanting to believe me at first. What happened? During a grand party at the Royal Palace Gardens, suddenly a horse rampaged. Elderly people were thrown out of the carriage and/or were trapped. It happened right before my eyes. The chaos was enormous. The situation was overwhelming. Rather recent, an elderly man became unwell while I was delivering a speech. I stopped immediately and calmly asked if there was a doctor or a nurse nearby. I requested everyone else to make room, and to bring the man a glass of water and Coke. The context was not comparable, of course, but nowadays it seems to succeed better. I seem to succeed better, calmly observing, capturing information, and communicating as clearly as possible. But that is not enough. It does not detract me from my intention and ambition to finally take a first aid resuscitation course, probably together with my staff. If only, thanks to such a course, my mother gave my father a second life, as it were. In 1989, my father suffered a cardiac arrest. My mother called 112 and resuscitated him thanks to the operator's excellent instructions. She gave him another 17 years. It is for that reason that I find it most important that the Provincial Emergency Management Training and Education Center, Campus Vesta, pays a lot of attention to trainings and courses on resuscitation. Ladies and gentlemen, being a representative of the provincial, regional, and federal government, the governor's role is rather complex in Belgium, but what is not? In my federal capacity, my main duties are related to law and order, security, and crisis management. In practice, in case of a larger scale incident or crisis, my role is to coordinate the different emergency services, fire and police services, the medical, emergency services, logistics, the army and civil protection, as well as communication. This role has proved especially challenging during and also very valuable during the recent or ongoing COVID crisis. But many other people were challenged so much harder. The sustained commitment, dedication, and professional care of our healthcare workers and emergency medical services during the COVID crisis was impressive. My gratitude and appreciation are beyond words. More than ever, the whole community experienced the indispensability of our emergency services. Ladies and gentlemen, the implementation of CPR guidelines, that is what this conference is about actions in the field that make the difference, about successful implementation is not the result of individual action. It is the result of people working together as a team towards the same goal. In an everyday context, surviving a cardiac arrest depends heavily, if not entirely, on the reaction of decisive and cooperating citizens. Like Aristotle already stated ages ago, the whole is something besides the parts. It is the dynamics and the interaction of a group of citizens that will determine a successful outcome. Like citizens that together start early bystander CPR with an automated defibrillator, or when emergency dispatchers offer phone CPR, or when ambulance personnel, nurses and doctors provide optimal care. One cannot overestimate the role of citizens in helping each other. I myself firmly believe that caring and resilient communities make more satisfied and happier communities. Yet too often, the potential of volunteers of helping and caring citizens was and is left untapped. I refer, for example, to the start of the COVID crisis, to last summer, enormous flooding, to the Ukraine refugee crisis. It is truly regrettable to note that in still too many cases, the right framework is lacking. Like in your field, the shortage of automated and life-saving defibrillators in Belgium, or the fact that our country is not yet implementing community first responder apps that can alert citizens to go and perform CPR on a larger scale. But luckily, we can and must learn from examples elsewhere in the world. And this conference, this Congress, provides great learning opportunities. I was informed that this Congress is not only a gathering of professionals, This Congress also reunites friends, real friends, friends from different professional backgrounds, doctors, nurses, paramedics. But you all share one great and most honorable goal: saving lives together. During the past 2 years, I chaired and took part in countless virtual meetings. Yes, indeed, virtual meetings. And virtual meetings can be very efficient. But in order to prepare for real emergencies involving real lives in danger, nothing can replace meeting colleagues and friends in real life. I am therefore so happy to welcome you all in Antwerp. Throughout history, Antwerp has always been a meeting place for the most diverse arts and cultures, interests and disciplines, talents and nationalities, a stimulating place for creative and innovative ideas, and a top address for exchanging them. You could not have chosen a better place than here in the heart of the city. I wish you a fantastic conference and, moreover, warm friendships. And do not hesitate to stay over for the weekend. The weather will be great. The City Hall, UNESCO World Heritage, reopens after a long period of renovation. Restaurants and bars are most willing to receive you with open arms. Thank you and a great time.
Governor Bergs, thank you so much for your inspiring and personal words. As you know, yesterday we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Cardiac Arrest Declaration in European Parliament. We will first show you a video, and then Marios Georgiou, who was at the birth of this declaration, will speak to you.
Dear colleagues, good morning. Great honor for you, Governor, to be here with us, because today I will be talking about a political tool, And I'm one of those people that believe that implementation can happen with the politicians. The politics are very important for us to make things happen and save more lives. So after you sharing a personal story, I will share another story. And in the next 5 minutes, speak about what lessons we learned in the last 10 years and probably the challenges we have to face in the next 10 years. So the story starts when a member of the European Parliament husband had a cardiac arrest back in my country, and we've been lucky to save him. And I was lucky to know her. And I went, and I was in the board of ERC back then, and I went to her asking her that you have a personal story, your husband has been saved, we need to save more people around, and we need to do something. So yes, we prepared the declaration. She gave me an example. We wrote the declaration, the board approved it, and with the leadership of the chairman of ERC back then, Marit Karsten, and the encouragement, we supported her at the parliament. We went to Strasbourg, to Brussels, speaking to MEPs and asking them to vote for this declaration. It has taken us from the 12th of March to the 14th of June 2012 when it was voted. Nothing could have happened if colleagues from around in this room didn't help. And please let me apologize if I forget some names, but I do remember how active some people and some national councils were when they approached their MEPs to vote for this declaration, and that were Professor Bettinger, Janusz Andres, Andy Locke, and a lot of others, which helped a lot. So Antigone Papadopoulou is the person here which got another 5 MEPs to co-sign for a declaration to be submitted. The other MEPs were from Ireland, from Bulgaria, from Portugal, and from Spain. So I'm not sure how I put this forward. Yes, so what happened, it was a chance. ERC has taken this opportunity to declare the 16th of October as the European Restart the Heart Day. So each year since then is devoted to a target group, to a theme. The first year was devoted to children saving lives, and you have seen some pictures of students being trained in the European Parliament in the 16th of October 2013. And the story goes on, and another theme on 14 and so forth. So this is a picture from the European Parliament with the MEP and the Commissioner of Health from Malta, Tonio Borg, Angelo Maurizio from Cardiology Society, Professor Bettinger from Germany, and chairwoman of ERC, Marit Karsten, and myself. There are 2 kids there. Mede, if I remember well the name, saved the other younger kid, and they were honored at the parliament back then. So all these things are really inspiring. The Commissioner of Health back then been trained been trained by Professor Bettinger, and then the story continues with saving loved ones on 2014, and on 2015 another theme, and 2016 another theme, And finally, what happened, two of our colleagues had the inspiration and the initiative to take it globally. So now the European Restart the Heart Day is World Restart the Heart Day. And hundreds of lives been saved out of this, hundreds and thousands of people being trained out of this opportunity, and this is indeed very exciting. So personally, I believe World Restart the Heart Day is an important tool for implementation of education and science. So what I will challenge for the next 10 years is the declaration. The declaration is still there, and it is still valid. The declaration is a strong political tool that can be taken by each one of you and go to your governments and ask them to take actions. It is simply asking member state to take actions, to educate people, to do public access defibrillator programs, to make events about awareing people and provide immunity in legislations for bystanders to do CPR and lay people to do CPR. So we have a long way to go. Next 10 years challenge is to increase the survivals, is to increase the people getting trained, and this is the only way, and we all here know that it will increase bystander CPR, which definitely triples survival. And I will finish with a very inspiring picture, which it's a picture from another conference of ERC in Vienna. On the stage, survivals were called, and I vision that probably in the next 10 years we probably do the same, involve survivals, call hundreds of thousands to maybe participate virtually. So this is an inspiring picture, and it is always inspiring, and our work is not getting paid with money. Is the ultimate satisfaction is saving lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marios. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Teresa Olasvengen, who will deliver the SAFAR lecture. Teresa.
Thank you. So it's a great honor to be asked to hold the Peter Safar Memorial Lecture, and I think a unique opportunity to take a step back and for me to think about what I consider to be the most important topics to talk about in resuscitation today. So if you get 20 minutes to talk to your fellow resuscitationists, old and new, what do you choose? I think it's been a rare opportunity to reflect both on where we've been, but also where we might be going. And of course, that story is going to have as many versions as it has people telling it. This is going to be my story. So the resuscitation community is not huge, and sometimes it feels like we're all sort of distant cousins. And if we were to look up our family tree, go back a bit, it seems like almost all of us, we've had the same sort of mentor grandfathers. At least that's what it felt like when I started looking into Peter Safar and preparing for this talk. That, and that every single last idea or innovation that I've ever had in resuscitation was of course not new at all, because Peter Safer thought about it 50 years ago. And actually, the more I started looking into it, kind of felt like I'd simply been sort of retracing just a few of his steps, from where I started with looking into CPR quality, to animal research, and then that growing frustration that we have so few therapies to really effectively treat the brain injury that some patients have after cardiac arrest. So I think one of the most fundamental questions or topics in resuscitation is that of ventilation. Now, we all need oxygen to survive, we know that, and at some point we're all going to need to be ventilated. But does that have to be immediate, or could we delay? Are lay rescuers really going to be capable of providing high quality or effective ventilation? I think that's where it gets difficult. I think when most of us think about Peter Safer, maybe one of the first things that comes to mind is the mouth-to-mouth experiments. I think a pretty wild proof of concept, really demonstrating that our expired air has enough oxygen that you can actually oxygenate someone else. So I think being able to recruit friends and colleagues to voluntarily, hopefully, be put under paralyzed and then mouth-to-mouth ventilated, I think is just as mind-blowing today as it was then. Today, maybe more because it's just completely unthinkable to ever get anything close to that through any ethical or regulatory board. Still, I think it's, as many others have pointed out before, I think it really is a testament to Peter Safer, both as a person and a researcher. I mean, imagine having colleagues trust you so completely they would actually go along with this experiment, allowing themselves to be mouth-to-mouth ventilated in the name of science and resuscitation. So I think following that initial enthusiasm and all the widespread training that followed, came the realization that CPR really needs to be simple and straightforward to be effective. So I think the pendulum started to shift away from mouth-to-mouth ventilation and more towards compression-only CPR. Now, we have animal experiments looking into these. They are somewhat conflicting. Some of the animal studies would show that it is actually possible to get a minimum amount of ventilation and oxygenation just simply from the chest compressions. But then the other experiments that did not keep the airway open saw a pretty rapid decline in blood oxygen levels. But then we have randomized controlled trials in the emergency medical dispatch. So these trials out of Seattle and Sweden randomized callers that did not know how to do CPR into either being told to do chest compression only or standard CPR. Now, the patients that received CPR from someone that had been instructed to do CPR only survived more than the patients that were treated by the callers where they were trying to teach them how to do mouth-to-mouth over the phone. But that's untrained rescuers. How about trained rescuers? I think a lot of us put our registry data into that debate. And in Oslo, when we were looking at patient outcomes, we didn't see any difference in survival in the patients that had gotten only compressions versus those that had gotten standard CPR. But I think there is a real concern about not being able to deliver mouth-to-mouth ventilation or ventilation. How about children? It doesn't quite sit right. Or how about patients that have suffered a drowning or overdose or any other respiratory problem? And I think the latest and the most comprehensive and registry study that we probably have, the European A22 study, actually saw that patients that received standard CPR did better than those that only received chest compression only. So I know, at least in Norway, our population is geographically spread. Our response intervals can be quite long, and sometimes maybe too long to be able to survive a cardiac arrest if no one there knows how to do mouth-to-mouth or if no one can ventilate. At least that's a discussion that I think we keep having. So inspired by Peter Safer, a colleague of mine, Jo Gramma Johansen, and I came up with the perfect experiment. So we thought, instead of anesthetizing and paralyzing our wives, our spouses, to see that, that we could actually do mouth-to-mouth ventilation, we would anesthetize each other and see if our spouses could do mouth-to-mouth on us. And of course, we're trained anesthetists. Surely we have the understanding to really give a informed consent. We would understand the risk. The ethical board would have to accept this. Our spouses were less impressed. My husband thought we were batshit crazy. Yu's wife suggested we might have better luck if we had some more interesting candidates to offer for the mouth-to-mouth ventilation. So I think ventilation remains to be important. And I think the Tango 2 study that's going on in Sweden right now is going to provide some really interesting new data. So in this trial, it's taking it a step further in the dispatch. So randomizing callers that actually report to have had CPR training to either, okay, do as you're trained, provide standard CPR, or provide compression only. So I think this is going to be a really interesting study to see the results from, and I think it's going to give us some very important new information about the role of early ventilation during CPR. So my introduction into resuscitation research was on CPR quality. So mentored by Petter Andreas Steen, he introduced me into this collaboration between researchers and industry. So these young up-and-coming researchers from Chicago, Ben Abella and Dana Edelson, were working together with our team in Oslo and some innovators at Lærdal, trying to improve CPR. So 50 years after Peter Sefar and Åsmund Lærdal makes the most frequently kissed girl in the world, we're still working together, trying to improve quality of care. Now, when I was starting out, these devices that could measure CPR quality were just becoming commercially available. And we were seeing the first results out of what was actually going on during cardiac arrest. So both in hospital and out of hospital, I think the results were quite disappointing. We were only delivering chest compressions half of the time, and half of the compressions that we did deliver were too shallow. Now, simply turning off a real-time automated feedback device just annoyed our paramedics and our doctors, and then just reporting back to them that their quality of care was crap did not magically solve the problem either. So since then, there have been many studies on real-time feedback devices. Some of them are really good. Some of them are very difficult to interpret. But I think all in all, their impact on patient outcomes have been underwhelming. So it seems like obvious parachute logic that we need to measure quality of care if we want to improve quality of care. But it seems equally obvious that we haven't quite found the perfect, efficient way to turn our measurements into improved outcomes for our patients. So where do we go from here? Well, maybe we need to go our separate ways. We have different systems, we have different resources, we have different populations. Now, some of you are doing really important work on registries, improving the data quality, and so that we can learn new things about our systems. Some of us are still looking into the physiology, and I think it's really surprising how much we still don't understand about how CPR generates forward blood flow. And then some of you are really pushing the envelope with high-risk, high-reward research into devices like ECMO or Reboa. So placing a catheter up the aorta to redirect blood flow during cardiac arrest, like they're trialing now in the Reboa arrest trial out of Trondheim, is not a procedure that's going to save millions of lives. I do, though, feel pretty sure that we're going to learn something new about resuscitation. And then we never really know, do we, when we're going to get that key piece of information that's going to unlock a whole new area in resuscitation. So I think it is really important that we keep just pushing in all of these directions. So when I was a medical student in Trondheim, I started thinking I wanted to be an anesthetist. So completely shameless, I go knock on the door of the chief of anesthesia, and on the other side of that door is Svein Erik Gisvold. So one of many anesthetists that made me want to be a part of the very inclusive and curious anesthesia family. And of course, it's a small world. Svein Erik knew Peter Safer quite well. They worked together for many years and did numerous studies on monkeys and dogs and rats. And they were very enthusiastic about the effects of barbiturates or calcium blockers or hemodilution or increasing blood pressure and hypothermia. But then not very many of these strategies made the successful transition into clinical practice. And I think realizing that the purists among us would not appreciate it, they started thinking we're not going to find one single silver bullet. It's probably going to be a multimodal cocktail approach. So in Oslo, we've been working on our pig model with a severe brain injury for the last few years. So we're arresting the pig, leaving it for 10 minutes, and then resuscitating through using a heart-lung machine. So we're doing it that way so we can get a pretty substantial brain injury. And then we measure the brain with pressure monitors, flow monitors. We measure the brain metabolism with microdialysis. And we've been looking into what happens to the brain after cardiac arrest if you increase the blood pressure, or during hypercapnia, or with various temperature levels. Yeah, again, you might say. But I think what we've learned from these studies, I guess, is that the pig brain does seem to like more blood pressure, does seem to like permissive hypercapnia, especially when it doesn't get the protective hypothermia. But we're still, I guess, some ways from finding really effective clinical strategies. Because the clinical trials have been disappointing, at least the post-arrest studies. And I think we all realize we're not looking for silver bullets. We're looking for incremental steps. And personally, I feel that hypothermia still has a role after cardiac arrest. It's not effective the way that we're using it right now. But still, I do feel like it has a role. And I think we're waiting for results from some really interesting trials that have been completed quite recently. So I think the EXACT trial from Australia, comparing two different, like a conservative to a more liberal oxygen titrating strategy immediately after ROSC, that's going to be really interesting. And then, of course, the TAME study, seeing if permissive hypercapnia in the ICU setting can actually save more people and produce more survivors with favorable neurological outcome. And we're not giving up. We have new things coming. So Markus Riffers and Niklas Nielsen are working on new initiatives, wanting to start a new big randomized controlled trial where patients can be randomized to different titrations of blood pressure, sedation, and fever control. And I think that's going to be really important moving forward as well. So while we're waiting for this new science, these incremental steps, I think it is important to say that we've actually had some pretty big leaps forward too, by just simply improving our quality of care and standardizing. So whether it be in the emergency medical dispatch, in the ambulance, or in the ICU, I think many of us have made real progress. Now in Oslo, Petter Andreas Steen and Lars Vik put in a lot of effort to improve our CPR quality in the ambulances in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think we got pretty happy with where we were, all things considered. But then Kjetil Sunde started looking into what was happening with the patients once they got into the ICU and was perhaps less happy. Only a quarter of our patients were surviving the initial admission, so not good enough. So Kjetil pretty much single-handedly persuaded every nurse, doctor, every key stakeholder that things needed to change, and implemented a standardized treatment protocol that included hypothermia, among other things, but basically just implementing things that we already knew. And after just a few years, our survival rates in our ICUs had doubled. So suddenly half of our patients were being discharged home. And this improvement stayed. It didn't go back down once the spotlight dimmed, but it didn't continue to increase as dramatically either. So where do we go from there? How do we make it even better? Do we standardize more? Do we make more protocols? I think many of us are starting to think that there's like a certain level of saturation where you get protocol fatigue, where maybe if you just add on more and more protocols and more standards, I think maybe it's going to make more harm than benefit. Well, then how can we improve? So I like to think about cardiac arrest in 3 categories. So this is my best guess on where my ICU is right now. So I think about a third of the patients, I think they're going to die no matter what we do. Right now, I don't think we have the therapy to save them. I think a third of our patients are going to survive no matter what we do, unless we get really creative. But then the last third, they're the difficult ones. They're the ones, they have the potential, but they're not going to save themselves. They have a pretty severe brain injury, and we need to pull out all the stops. So it makes sense to me that we can't be treating all of these patients exactly the same. We really do need to understand what's going on with each individual patient. And I think also we need to understand within our system, when do we need to keep things simple and standardized, and when is it safe to move on to a more complex, individualized strategy? Easier said than done. So I think most of us agree we need to tailor treatment. We need to become more individualized. Well, how do we do that? I don't know. But I do want to give you an example. And I think it's a start. It's not the perfect example where you have the perfect brain monitor that's going to tell you that the brain is happy, or it's going to tell you exactly what the brain needs to recover. But I think it is a start. So this is a pretty new observational study from Vancouver. They collected 65 patients with pretty severe cardiac arrests, so meaning they had at least 10 minutes of CPR, and they had a unconfounded GCS under 9, so meaning they actually had a quite substantial brain injury. And then 21 of these, these were patients included into various other studies, so just purely observational. But 21 of these patients got an ICP monitor and a brain tissue oxygenation monitor, and they were treated much like we treat our traumatic brain injuries. So not really any complete new concept, but taking a concept that we know and applying it to a new group. So trying to treat them, trying to keep their intracranial pressures under 25, trying to keep their blood oxygen or their brain oxygen levels over 20, they would titrate the therapy for these patients. So like we do for traumatic brain injury, they could adjust vasopressors to adjust the blood pressure. They could increase sedation if they were having trouble with intracranial hypertension. They could lower the temperature. And I think when you look overall, the 21 patients, not very many, but the 21 patients that had this monitoring were treated differently. So overall, they got more sedation, they were colder, and they had more vasopressors. So what's the take-home message? It's not that all our cardiac arrest patients need more sedation or more vasopressors or a lower temperature. But it is really interesting that I think it does prove the point that our patients are not the same, and patients with a severe brain injury should not be treated exactly the same as patients that do not have a severe brain injury. And in case you're curious how these patients did, I think the survival rate among those 21 was impressive. 43% of those 21 that were neuromonitored survived. And they tried their best to pick out matched controls, and in that group only had 10% survival, whereas then the rest of the cohort had 18. So by no means, it's not a randomized controlled trial, but I think it is an interesting concept, and I think it's a step in the right direction. So, last slide. Where have we been, and where are we going? So we've seen a lot of negative or neutral trials, and I think some of us might feel like we're going backwards. But I don't think that getting new knowledge can ever mean going backwards. I do think, though, that we need to individualize our therapy to a whole other level than we're doing right now if we're to get to that difficult third, not to mention maybe looking at that last third. And I do worry that our eagerness to treat everyone with every therapy we have, without the tools to identify what patients need what treatment at what dose, might lead us to abandon useful treatments that some of our patients actually need to survive. I worry that we might be over-treating some of our patients, and that by over-treating them, we're causing harm, and that this harm is going to camouflage some of the benefits that other people or other patients might be having from those same therapies. But it is really important to do the large pragmatic trials that test the way our therapies, the way that we're delivering them today in our clinical practice. Because if things don't work the way that we're doing it now, then we should do things differently, obviously. I just do think that it's extremely important that we don't throw out all the babies with their bathwaters. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Teresa. We will now go to Jess Saw, the chair of our scientific committee of this conference, and he is in the UK, which is far and not far from here. And I'm just hoping that we will connect with Jess, and he will present you a hopefully short overview of the program of the next 2 days.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to talk through the scientific program very rapidly. I have no conflicts of interest apart from being the program chair. And importantly, if you're at the conference or at home, you can download the ERC app if you haven't already and access both the program, and if you decide to be in a different room or at home, you can access the conference sessions live, either through the app or through the conference website. Today, we're at the opening ceremony. We've got 2 sessions straight afterwards, one on equity and diversity and another on hot topics from ILCOR. In the blank boxes in the online track, there'll be sessions pre-recorded from last year's Antwerp virtual meeting going through guidelines. So if you're at home or you want to see something else, you can do that through the app or the website. The e-posters, you can only attend if you're at the conference, unfortunately, but there is a lunchtime webinar from the European Society of Anaesthesia and Intensive Care today, and that'll be happening over the lunch hour. And then later on, there's the Young Investigator competition and free papers, and then closing sessions on temperature control, education, and the Eureka registry session. Tomorrow, it's an early start, 8 o'clock. So if you're at home and doing it hybrid, you need to look at the times to your own time zone. And again, there's 3 starting sessions, and all of these can be accessed virtually. There's the best of the best session and 2 further free paper sessions, and then a webinar with the European Society of Emergency Medicine. There's a Belgian Resuscitation Council session, Pediatric Life Support World Restart a Heart. Again, you can only attend the posters if you're there in person, but there's a lunchtime webinar with the European Society of Cardiology. There's sessions after lunch, and then the closing ceremony, which will include the Nagovsky lecture. Importantly, if you're at home or in Antwerp, please take part and enjoy. You can ask questions if you're in the audience by standing up and using the microphones, and through the Slido app if you're at home or even on the venue. And you can also tweet about it at the hashtag Resus22. So thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you, Jazz, and please stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the last part, say the end of this opening ceremony. Before I am going to ask to start the video, I'd like to thank you for your presence here, and also those who are virtually present, thank you very much for attending this session. I'm already saying that I'm hoping that we are having a fantastic conference today and tomorrow, and a very successful continuation. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
I'm begging, begging you to put your loving hand out, baby. I'm begging, begging you to put your loving hand out, baby. I'm begging, begging you to put your loving hand out, darling. Riding high when I was king, I played it hard and fast, 'cause I had everything. I walked away, you want me then, but easy come and easy go, and it wouldn't. So anytime I bleed, you let me go. Yeah, anytime I feel, you got me, no. Anytime I see, you let me know. But the plan and see, just let me go. I'm on my knees when I'm begging, 'cause I don't wanna lose you. Hey, yeah, ra-da-da-da, 'cause I'm begging, begging you, put your love in the hand out, baby. I'm begging, begging you, put your love in the hand out, baby. I'm begging, begging you, put your love in the hand out, baby. I'm begging, begging you, to put your love in the hand out, darling. I'm begging, begging you, to put your love in the hand out, baby. I'm begging, begging you, to put your love in the hand out, darling. I'm begging, begging you, to put your love in the hand out. Oh no.
What the fuck? Uh-oh.
plopper de plopper de plop.
Mega Mindy.
Baba Yaga.
1, 2, 3, 4, naar achter dat gaat door. 1, 2, 3, 4, even rusten dan weer door. 1, 2, 3, 4, links en rechts en spijt en schuif. 1, 2, 3, 4, adem in en adem uit.
Ik voel me meestal niet zo lekker bij het gewinkel van de wekker. Ik heb moeite met mijn slaperige lijk.
Ik krijg mijn ogen haast niet op en ik kan maar op mijn lopen. Want alle vier mijn pootjes zijn te stijf.
Ik zei we moeten wat verzinnen om de dag mee te beginnen.
Warning. System overload. Warning. System overload. Warning. System overload.
1, 2, 3, 4, naar achter dat gaat door. 1, 2, 3, 4, even rusten en dan weer door. 1, 2, 3, 4, links en rechts en spijt en sluit. 1, 2, 3, 4, adem in en adem uit.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga, Baba Yaga, Baba Yaga. Doe die dans als Baba Yaga. In de club als ik dans met de meisje aan. Ze kijkt me aan en ze vraagt hoe je meisje krijgt. Kan niet hangen want ik weet het gaat niet met je. Ze vraagt door die action maar ik gooi een action move. Dat checkt ze dood, dat hou nu goed. Ik ben hier met mijn crew Baba Yaga. Net zo mij gaan we ook in het Frans. Allo rondons, ewa vai vai vai. Allo rondons, ewa vai vai vai. Zij voelt die flow zo van ai ai ai. Zo van ai ai ai. Zij voelt die flow zo van ai ai ai. Je voelt die vibe, vibe. Wij leven die life, life, life. Ben met Baba Yaga. Doe die dans als Baba Yaga. Ben met Baba Yaga, Baba Yaga. Maken die stappen, je ziet we gaan hard. Ik zie het, je snapt me, je vraagt me te dansen. Maar ik ben op flappen, geen groen of paars. Zolang ik je pak je blijf ik in dit trance. Dansen la dansen la dansen la dans. Met Stromae gaan we ook in het Frans. Allo rondons, ewa vai vai vai. Allo rondons, ewa vai vai vai. Zij voelt die flow zo van ai ai ai. Zo van ai ai ai. Zij voelt die flow zo van ai ai ai. Je voelt die vibe, vibe. Wij leven die life, life, life. Ben met Baba Yaga. Doe die dans als Baba Yaga.
Baba Yanga, Baba Yanga, Baba Yanga. Doe die dans als Baba Yanga. In de club als ik dans met de mask aan. Ze kijkt me aan en ze vraagt hoe je mask af. Kan niet hangen want ik weet het gaat niet met je. Ze vraagt door die action maar ik gooi een action.